This is a production of SDPB.
Coming up on Game Time, the season kicked off last week. We'll get you caught up on all the highlights and pivotal games from week one. Plus, we'll preview the season for the big schools and all nations who tee it up this week. All coming up next on Game Time.
Game Time is supported by the South Dakota Career and Technical Student Organization Center. Through CTSOs, students learn professional development, leadership, and industry-specific skills, helping students learn, lead, and succeed. And by South Dakota State University grows talent, strengthens industries, and supports communities across our state, building opportunity in a greater South Dakota. More at sdstate.edu.
This is Game Time on SDPB. Here are your hosts, Jason Andera and Nate Weck.
All right, Jandy, here we are again. High school football last week, we saw 4 of the classes start their regular season. We got 3 more that are going to be kicking off as well, plus 2 classes of all nations that are going to be starting up action too. So there's 9 classes of football in South Dakota.
We're going to cover it all. We're going to cover it all. We're at least going to talk about it all here on this episode. I can't wait. A lot of cool stuff to talk about last week. And, of course, the big school teams we haven't had a chance to touch on yet. We're going to do it today.
Right, yep. Previewed the four of the classes last week. We're going to preview the other 3 and 3 for the high school side of things, and then the 2 all nations. So a lot to get to. Let's go through some of the big games from this past week.
Yeah, in headlines, I guess to start things off, St. Thomas More, the defending champs, came back. Lost that huge senior class. We weren't sure what to expect. Mobridge Pollock coming in with Max Saxon. Didn't have their quarterback back, who transferred late in the season. So we didn't know how that would stack out. And St. Thomas More came out, and Noah Wald took charge. 4 total touchdowns, 2 through the air, 2 to Cooper Sales. And St. Thomas More really handled Mobridge Pollock in that one, 41-6. So that was, to me, a real statement win for them. They came in the polls number 2. People thought maybe we lost a little bit, but hey, now you got to reconsider. They might be the team to beat in 11B.
Yeah, St. Thomas More looked really, really polished early on. Another team that a lot of us were talking about was Wall. They won it last year. They're in a different class this year, and they had a matchup against Bennett County, and boy, was this one fun.
We didn't know what to expect here either because, Wall didn't return a ton of starters, but they had a little firepower, but couldn't get out of the gates. Let's give a little credit to Bennett County. They did a great job of moving the ball up and down the field. They were up 24-6 at halftime, actually in the third quarter, when they hit a 68-yard strike from Maddox Reese to Rush O'Neill, and that, it looked pretty bad at that point, down 24-6 in the third quarter. But then Wall caught fire. They figured out the running game a little bit. They got a nice touchdown to shooter Frederick in the end zone, their new receiver who transferred from Mobridge. And then they recovered an onside kick, got an interception. Everything started to go their way. And at the end of the game, it was Tanner Vollmer who put them ahead with a touchdown with less than a minute to play to secure the victory for Wall. So a little scare for them, but they really showed some resilience late in that game.
Any other teams that you liked from this last week? Elk Point Jefferson obviously played as well.
Elk Point Jefferson had a tough one against McCook Central. They found a way to win. We saw Viborg Hurley open their new stadium.
Yeah, how was that?
I was at that one. It was great. Bridgewater Emory Ethan moved down a class. It was nothing at halftime, and finally Viborg Hurley found a way to get it in. They got a great rushing performance from Jack Kessler, who ended up rushing in a couple of touchdowns to get the win. So that was really cool. We could touch on everything. There's a lot of really cool stuff that happened last week, but those were some of the ones that really stand out.
All right, well, let's take a quick look at the rankings here as we look at 11B, 9 and the 3 9-man classes. 11B, Elk Point Jefferson, this is going to be interesting this year to watch Elk Point Jefferson, St. Thomas More, and winner in those top 3
You see the number 1 votes there in the parentheses, 10 and 8. These are 2 very close teams. I think that are going to fight it out as the season goes on. And then winner Dual, was tied with Parker Marion late in the game, and then they came out and got a nice win. Sioux Valley pulled ahead against Roncalli after a slow start too. So we're going to see that, some slow starts and then pushing it into full gear.
All right, then taking a look real quick here at 9AA. A little bit more unanimous with the first place vote so far.
Yeah, Parkson looked really good against Hill City. They put up 52 points, a couple of touchdowns from Mason Jervik. Bonham was really convincing, Platte Geddes as well. Viborg Hurley moves up into the rankings, and Hamlin, despite the loss to Castlewood, stays in the top 5.
Yeah, how about that game, Hamlin versus Castlewood?
Well, yeah, there was some impressive running by Camden Kessel we'll talk about in the Game Changers. He was not going to be tackled, let's put it that way.
All right, and then 9A, you got Freeman. A lot of people really excited about this Freeman team this year. You got Howard, and like we mentioned, Castlewood as well, kind of rounding out that top 3.
Yeah, Freeman with a nice win over Alcester Hudson. I think Alcester Hudson, only gets 3 in the receiving votes, but I think they're a team to watch out for. They're just the way they played against Freeman in that opener. And then Castlewood moves in and gets a first place vote as well. So how about that? And I love Kimberville White Lake. I think this is a team to watch out for. They were very impressive in their first game.
All right, and then you got Class 9B, St. Mary's. Very strong team this year. They've got a lot back, looking good early on. Obviously, they got Wall there too. They were able to find a way, like as we mentioned, in Bennett County. And then Warner, another team that we're expecting some fun things from.
Yeah, I think all 3 of those teams are in the mix. Avon played really well coming out of the gates. But back to St. Mary's, Brady Jewett did a great job coming in, transferring in, playing quarterback. He only had to play like a quarter and a half. They really took care of business against Dubrook. I wondered if that gap between them and Wall would get bigger, but there's still some people out there voting Wall #1 after that impressive fourth quarter comeback.
All right, and the other thing that makes this show fun is every week we highlight the game changers.
Yeah.
Last week we listed some game changers of players to watch throughout the season and the different classes and things like that. Well, here's a list of some of the game changers, some of the big performances.
Let's talk about those players that came out and dominated. Colt Becker was definitely one of them. They took over DeSmet 54-22, and he ran wild, and that one was 4 total touchdowns. I love what Peyton Glenn did for Rapid City Christian. That Rapid City Christian Chamberlain game, there are a handful of players from that game in this Game Changers list. I know Rapid City Christian lost, but look at what Peyton Glenn did for 354 yards passing, and he also ran in 3 touchdowns. That's crazy. But on the other side, you had Chamberlain put up some good numbers as well. Austin Rose, 17 carries, 190 yards, and 3 touchdowns for him. But the one we have to talk about here is Castlewood's quarterback, Camden Kessler. Ran the ball 19 times for 248 and 6 touchdowns against the #2 team in 9AA. So that's what I call an impressive start.
Well, that might be the reason right there why they got a first place vote this past week.
And now they play Howard coming up this next week. A really tough start to their season, but I don't know if I'd want to play against Camden Kessler. We'll see how he does this week.
Yeah, 6 touchdowns, that's absolutely impressive. One of the other names on this list that I thought was really impressive was Easton Cheddar out of Freeman. He had the 99 yards on 4 catches, 2 touchdowns, but it was the two-way effort with the 19 tackles on defense that really impressed me.
Exactly. He could be the player of the week just because of what he did on both sides of the ball. He is a force for Freeman this year.
So there's the list of game changers for the week. Again, we appreciate everybody that sends in some of these top performances week after week. It is always fun for us just to kind of look at the list.
It's fun for everybody.
And yeah, it's great to give kids some of the props throughout the year of some of the great efforts and performances. There's a lot of things going on this time of year. You got tennis, you got golf, you've got all of these fall activities with volleyball, but football obviously that are all going on. But one thing that we didn't really talk about this last year, but you had kids go through Lincoln. Marching band's such a big thing this time of year too.
It is huge, and we were just talking about this off camera before, how much effort it takes to have a successful marching band and how much time these kids take in this extracurricular activity to make it what it is. It's pretty impressive, and yeah, they mean a lot to each and every school out there.
A lot of them, some of these big programs, they start their practicing and band camp type of thing in July, like late July, and then they're running schedules that go 9 to 5 or noon to 9. Like, there's a lot of time and dedication that go into it. So we did want to just give a quick shout out to all the kids and things like that too, that you will see as part of the Friday Night Lights experience this year, a lot of times in the stands and then also at half times. All right, well, let's start previewing these 3 other 11-man classes. We'll talk a little bit about it with 11 AA too, with some of these big teams, but it just seems like there are 1 or 2 teams in every one of these things where you can immediately point at it and say, okay, that team's going to be special.
Yeah, and there's a few in AAA. We've seen the competitive balance in AAA really escalate over the last few years. Last year, no team went undefeated. Brandon Valley ended up getting it done with that really special senior class that they had. But Lincoln making it to the Dome, the third, fourth year in a row. So this is those are the two teams I think you have to start talking about.
Yeah, so let's look at the Lincoln Patriots. Obviously, last year, a lot of people thought they maybe had a chance against Brandon in that championship game, but Brandon kind of was the kryptonite last year when it came to Lincoln.
It was defense. I mean, great line, great defense. Found a way to contain Brody Schaefer just enough, even though that Lincoln team was so powerful offensively. I think defensively they had worked so many new players in last year. Lincoln did. And I think that's a strength this year. As I talked to Jared Fredenberg, he said we've got 6 guys back who got all last season in, 5 really new talented players to add to them. So I think Lincoln improves a little bit on defense, and I think that's what put them at number 1 in the polls.
All right, and then Jefferson's another team that you really like. This Jefferson team on what they might have their sights set on this year. They might be ready to fully pop. And they've got a big game coming up. I believe they even play Saturday against Harrisburg.
Yeah, they do. And, the talk in the offseason, they used 2 quarterbacks last year in Kason Mediger and Boston Bryant. Both were terrific in their own ways. And coming into the season, talking to Eric Struck, he said, that's the plan again this year. I don't know if they've changed that plan. We'll see on Saturday. But they've got 2 really good weapons at quarterback. And then Jace Unzen and Tyson Teese, 2 of the best receivers. So offensively, this team could explode. And then you talk about their defense with, Bo Kerner and Anthony Petrone, 2 of the top-level all-state type players. So if they can get their lines together, get their blocking going, get some kind of a running game, I gave them a number 1 vote in the latest media poll. I think they are the team to beat in this class.
Yeah, 11 AAA. I think it's just going to be fun. There's going to be some fun conversations here with 4 of the teams here, I think, throughout, and maybe even more than that.
Well, Harrisburg, too. Not a ton of returners, but they've got a lot of dudes on this team, including their offensive line. The entire offensive line back. Bryson Esser is not, he's come up through the ranks and become one of the best players in the state. And then O'Gorman, I think, has one of the best teams they've had at O'Gorman, just because of Chase Hermanson, Isaac Myers, a lot of really good talent on that team, too. So, I think those are your 5 contenders. I agree with the poll there. And then Washington just outside there. And then those other contenders, I think Roosevelt's getting better, Central's getting better. There could be a lot of excitement this year in AAA.
All right, and then we mentioned some of these kids' names already, but let's just take a quick look here at the Game Changers preview for 11 AAA. Who do you like?
Oh, my goodness. This was a really hard list to make. I could have tripled this list, and I think we're going to have enough players to make a Game Changer list. But I pulled these guys out because they were either all-state winners or I think they're going to be huge impact players this year. Austin Dowd out of Brandon Valley. We didn't talk a lot about Brandon Valley. They only have a couple starters back, but he's going to be a really important piece on that team. I love Chase Hermanson, the quarterback for O'Gorman, a guy that comes back with experience, playing for a coach who can throw. That's going to be huge. And, of course, Brody Schaefer, you got to talk about. This guy is going to put elite career numbers up in 11 AAA this year. He's been starting since he was a sophomore, and now as a senior really controls that team. He said, the coaches don't want me to run quite as much this year, but I think when stuff happens, you just let him do his thing, and he's such a great dual threat quarterback.
Yeah, when he starts running around, we saw it in the championship game last year too, when he starts running around and it's like his vision changes, and it's almost like there's some pixie dust being sprinkled over him at that same time, because that's when you get some of those staple moments from Brody Schaefer that you look at. All right. Class 11 AA. Pierre obviously had some struggles throughout the season last year, or maybe we should say some growing pains, took some time to figure things out. They popped at the right time, won another state title, and I tell you what, this Pierre team I think is going to be really good right away.
And you had a chance to talk to Steve Steele, right? He's got to be excited about so many players back, because some years, they're rebuilding, and some years they just start from 5, 6, 7, 8 starters this year back. So he's got to be excited.
Yeah, he was. And I was there last week for practice. I had a chance to talk to him in the morning. Here's just a few thoughts from Pierre head coach Steve Steele.
Yeah, we've got a lot of guys back. We only graduated 3 seniors on both sides of the ball from last year, from where we ended. Obviously, we had a lot of injuries that kind of ended up being a net positive in terms of this year, because there's guys that got meaningful experience. But it's going to be a fun season. I think we've got some very, very high-end talent And then we've got a lot of guys battling for those final few positions right now. So the fun part of that is that the cream's going to rise to the top, and you're going to get a good player out of it. The hard part is there's a lot of competition for those spots too. So it's going to be a fun year to find that balance of utilizing the top end guys while also making sure they get healthy or they stay healthy, hopefully, to make it through the full season. 24 seniors out for the team right now, and there's a lot of them that are really trying to find their way to the field. So hopefully more experienced. Hopefully we can be further along faster, just with the fact that a lot of them do have that game experience already.
All right, so we know Pierre's going to be good, right? We're going to talk about them quite a bit here throughout the year, but what are some other teams in 11AA this year that you want to have your eye on?
I don't think 11AA is going to be quite as crazy as it was last year. I mean, can you remember? Everybody was beating up on everybody. I think Pierre feels like the safe number one pick here, but after that, I think we're going to see it just like we did last year. A lot of beating up on each other. Huron's back with Anderson Porish and Carter Porish. So I think their quarterback situation is really good. They've got a lot of talent back. I think Yankton is a team that lost a lot of the senior class, but really likes the athleticism of their younger classes. And then Keegan LaCroix, the all-state player, back for them. T-Area is the team I have my eyes on. I think with a new head coach in Brent Johnson, he's been on the staff before, but I think they'll be able to breathe some new life into this offense. Mitch Grant is one of the best individual players in this class. He's going to carry this team, a ton of talent. Hayden Bialas, too, maybe the best defender in this entire class. I mean, that's big words, but he is that good off the edge. And then Spearfish, Watertown. I mean, these two teams, I feel like, could contend. They might not have all the pieces back. Watertown especially, I think, maybe will surprise some people this year and leap into that top 5.
And then Spearfish obviously has Thomas Hughes as well, who's another really good player.
Well, Cade Vavruska, Thomas Hughes, a lot of individual talent. They don't have quite as much size and depth as they had in the last couple of years, but I think they're there. And Sturgis is another team that I think really could cause some havoc out west. They've got things going.
All right, let's look at some of the game changers for 11AA.
Well, some of the Pierre guys we got to talk about, especially though Cooper Terwilliger. This guy's been starting since he was a freshman. He lines up a little bit on the defensive line, but on offense, he plays the tight end position, but they just get the ball to him whenever they need something to happen, and he makes it happen. It's so hard to tackle him. He's headed to Penn State next year to play his college ball. He is, he's a generational player.
He is very, very good. And that's the thing that's going to be special with Pierre is they're going to have a lot of kids that are going to, I think you're going to see on this Game Changers list this year. Especially even too, like Jaron Deal. He was getting some one-on-one time when I was with Steve Steele last week for practice. He was getting some one-on-one time with Coach Steele and just working and things like that.
Yeah, Jaron Deal, Porter Hunsley, two guys who, as sophomores last year really didn't have huge roles going into the season, ended up leading them to a championship. And now this year as juniors, I think they're very key parts of that Pierre team. Well, you see a lot of Pierre players on here. There's a lot of guys that could make a huge impact in 11AA. These are just a few.
All right, then you got 11A. All right, so we've seen some really good grit the last few years from Lennox, the Lennox Orioles team, Coach Flannery, what he's done there. But a lot of people, I think, right away this season are talking about Sioux Falls Christian and what they can bring to the table.
Yeah, they come back with 6 starters on offense, 5 on defense, including their quarterback, Cooper Strandy, who, he had a passing offense around him, but they didn't have to use the passing offense very much. With Kim Nelson coming in, kind of running the offense, they opened it up a little bit more, and I think they can open it up even more this year when you have a guy like Branton Rossner making plays on the outside. Jude Prinz, another guy who can make some big plays, and their line is huge on both sides of the ball. So that makes me think that Sioux Falls Christian might not be done with contending for titles at this point. But the rest of the class, there's a lot of teams to talk about.
Well, okay, so like West Central, Matt Thorson, he's one of the, he's part of that Steve Steele coaching tree as well. He's going to be in year 2 with West Central. I think West Central, too, is a team to watch this year.
I do, too. And with 5 starters back for them, a year into that system, Tanner Wagner, maybe the top tight end. Well, I can't say the top tight end in the state because we've got a lot of really good ones, but he is an emerging talent at tight end and can really lead on the defensive side as well. So Tanner Wagner's a guy to watch. And then all those guys, Boshe Knight, they've got just explosive playmakers. So, yeah, West Central to me is that team that maybe could threaten in that top echelon for teams that are really trying to contend for a state title.
And then Veenhoff is back with Madison as well, correct?
Veenhoff is back to throw. The supporting cast, maybe not as big as he's had in the past, but yeah, they're definitely in it. And we talked about Lennox too. They still have a ton of all-state players back. I think, with Drake Mickelson heading to University of Minnesota to play next year, he's going to be really tough to stop. And then Del Rapids, probably the best total offensive line in this class. They've got a guy heading to South Dakota State next year, and Beckett Nelson, an all-state returner, and Charlie Becker. So I think they're going to ride that offensive line. And, when you have a good offensive line, you can stay in a lot of games. And I think Del Rapids plans to do that all year.
All right, well, let's look a little bit more deeper here into some of the key players with 11A as part of the Game Changers.
Yeah. So, again, a ton of great players to talk about. But let's talk about Seth Reinhardt out of Dakota Valley, another guy heading to SDSU next year. He's had injury problems in the past. I think he and the rest of Dakota Valley, that could be one of those teams outside the top 5 that makes a push. They've got a brand new coach coming over from Briar Cliff who was a head coach there, and he just wanted to have that high school coaching pace instead of the college coaching pace, and he's going to make a big difference there. I think there's a lot of great players on this list to watch, and Brant Wassner, we mentioned him for Sioux Falls Christian, one of the best overall athletes in the state. He could have a special year hooking up with Cooper Strandy.
Yeah, it'll be a fun one to watch here, especially in some of the early weeks with all these classes, just to kind of see look at how things unraveled with the 3 9-man classes in 11B last week and how there were some surprises. I got to think we're going to see something somewhere here in these 3 top classes as well.
Yeah, there's going to be some shuffling for sure. We always learn so much in the first week, and then there's an upset and we have to decide, was that team maybe not as good as we thought, or was the team that beat them much better than we thought? And that's why we keep watching the season every week.
All right, and then we've got the All Nations Football Conference as well. 18 teams this year. You got 9 teams in 9A, 9 teams in 9B for that. So there's been some adjusting. Lakota Tech is now involved in All Nations. But Lakota Tech, man, Eric Swiftwater, their head coach, he knows a thing or two about football.
Yeah, and just because I looked at the numbers, and you've got Winnebago at the top, the defending champs, but Lakota Tech, even though they were 0-9 last year, I think they're a team that could contend with these top teams, just the way they have things going. Dayton Eagle Bowl back at quarterback, some really good young sophomore running backs. I think they're a team, that maybe starts at like the number 5, but they could contend with any of these top teams. And speaking of those top teams, we talked about Winnebago, lost 13 seniors from that undefeated team, but they're a team that's going to reload. So I think they have got to be one of the favorites here. Todd County, has Bain Yellow Eagle back. He ran for almost 1,200 yards last year, and they won 8 games. I think Little Wound is a team, lost some real key seniors, but we'll see some guys come back. And then Makpialuta had a winning season last year. That's great to see from where they were to now have a winning season. I think they belong in the mix here, as well as some of the top teams in All Nations 9A.
All right, and then you got 9B. Okay, so like McLaughlin had a big championship win last year, which was massive for the community.
Oh, it's huge.
You've got White River, who has really been a really good football program since they transitioned to All Nations. So you got them in there. Lower Brule has been there since the beginning of All Nations.
But they switched classes.
They do. They've
back
switched
down to 9B this year. I think that'll help.
Yep, exactly. So, I mean, you've got some really good teams that are creating some really good identities with football that are in this mix too with 9B.
Yeah, I think the favorites have to be White River. They only lost 2 seniors off that team that went to the Dome. Their only 2 losses last year were to McLaughlin, a couple of close ones, including the one in the Dome that they just couldn't, they couldn't handle John Eagle Jr., who just ended up dominating on the Vermilion turf down there. But McLaughlin is a team that lost a lot. They've got a chance to come back. And then we've got a couple new teams coming in with Walthill. They were 0-8 last year, but I really like some of the players that they bring. So we've got some new teams, a new look in 9B.
All right, and here's some of the players to watch for the Game Changers with All Nations.
Yeah, and these guys were either All-State or All-State honorable mention last year, who coming back this year. I think some of the guys you got to look at are some of those White River guys. Makai Krogman had a big year last year. Bain Yellow Eagle, we talked about, was one of the top running backs in all of All Nations last year, is back this year. Carter Nunez out of Walthill is a great dual threat quarterback, and even though they didn't win last year on their schedule, now playing an All Nations schedule, I think they could be a real threat in 9B.
All right, and as we do every week, we like to also preview some of the top, I guess, the key games that
Yeah.
we've sort of keyed in on for the upcoming week. Jandy, looking at the top tilts, there's a lot going on, but Brandon Valley at Bellevue West.
So yeah,
talk about that one.
This year, great job by the Sioux Falls Metro schools deciding to play against some of the Metro schools from the Omaha area. John Krogstrand used to be at South Dakota High School Activity Association, now is in Omaha.
Yep.
So they're able to work with Casey Miley to get these games to happen. So the very first week, we have our first Sioux Falls Metro game against Omaha Metro game. It's Brandon versus Bellevue West. Last year, Bellevue West, because you probably don't know much about them, they were 5-5, but they threw the ball for 237 yards a game, had an all-state quarterback. This year, their all-state receiver, Bryce Johnson Jr., is back. He had a huge year. And then they've also got a sophomore, or he was a sophomore last year, was an all-state player, now a junior, Micah Santiago, who has Power 4 offers. So they've got some talent, but they're going against the Brandon Valley team that has to have 9 or 10 new starters on offense. So it'll be interesting to see where those two teams are at.
Yeah, I love that whole aspect of having Omaha versus some of the Sioux Falls Metro area teams here over the next few years. I think that's going to be a lot of fun to watch.
That'll be great. It's great for both those two teams to have an extra opponent that can really challenge them.
All right, and then you've got the Tiger Bowl. It's Jefferson at Harrisburg. It'll be interesting to see how Jefferson and Harrisburg both kind of react to that game. It's always tough early on, just to kind of when teams are still figuring things out. O'Gorman travels over to Lincoln for that game as well at Howard Wood Field. So, you've got some teams in 11 AAA that are certainly games to watch.
11 AAA, we're going to have a shuffling in the rankings because, those top 5 teams are either playing each other or, in Brandon Valley's case, playing against an Omaha team. So that's going to be a lot of fun. The 11 AA games are going to be a lot of fun as well. Huron taking on T Area. I think these are the two teams I personally have marked as contenders in that second to third spot in the poll right now. And then you got Sturgis going to Pierre. So Pierre will try to defend their title on Saturday at home against the good Sturgis.
All right, and then with 11A, you've got Madison at Del Rapids, Sioux Falls Christian at Lennox.
So this is the one, this is the one. In the last couple of years, they've played against each other and had great regular season battles. They've also played in the Dome the last 2 years in a row. And, Lennox, I think, treats the beginning of the year a little different than some teams. Like, they're just trying to work on themselves. So, they haven't competed as well early in the season the last couple of years as they have in the late part of the season. So, not an excuse, but I'm just saying, they might have a little further to go than Sioux Falls Christian to open things up. But what a great week one matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you got Hamlin that's going to go to Britton Hecla. Hamlin tried to avenge that loss to Castlewood with a road game where you got to go way up north as well for them.
And Britton Hecla knocking on the door of that top 5. I think the way they played last week, they looked like a top 5 team. So that'll be a lot of fun to see. And then Parkston Platte Geddes, another top 5 battle in 9AA. Platte Geddes they both played really well last week, and now 1 week under their belts, I think we're going to see a really great matchup there.
And then Howard at Castlewood. This one is going to be one. If you can't watch it live, you got to go back. And
this is another one of those top tilts of the week. Castlewood really impressed with me last week with what they did, and Camden Kessler did, but Howard did as well. And I think these are two teams that are dome or bust type teams. They're definitely envisioning themselves as deep playoff run teams.
All right, and then Sully Buttes at Kimball White Lake.
Another good one as well. I love Sully Buttes got a nice win last week over Faulkton as well. And usually we talk more about teams like that are playing each other. We just had too many good games to talk about. But those two teams, Sully Buttes and Kimball White Lake, hoping to make a statement here early in the season.
All right, so there's a lot going on now. We're really into the thick of things now.
Yep.
We're on the ground running, and we're excited that we're going to be able to do this every week. Join back and recap all the action from all of the classes, and also help preview the following week and things like that. So we'll be back next week.
All right.
He's Jason Ander. I'm Nate Weck. We'll see you next week on Game Time.